A quick show and tell, or a look around the room. There's a lot of faces in here that I know, and some of them might even know what I'm about to talk about already, but has anybody else come across critical chain project management as a methodology? Could I get a quick show of hands? So, a couple, yeah, not a lot. That's interesting. Okay. I'm always curious as to who wants to know more. Is it because you already know about it and you want to get a bit more understanding, or you've never heard of it and you just want to come in and see? So I'm no expert by any means in any way, shape or form on this topic, but I do think that it's a sound methodology. I do think that it works when it's used wisely and judiciously. And so I'm quite happy to come and talk for 40 minutes or so about our experience with it, and also our perception of the method and how it works, and in a very unselfish model of sharing knowledge with the peers that you work with in industries. You might well take away some of these ideas and be able to use them yourselves. You just never know. So in short, I want to just start by reminding you that just because I'm telling you something, that doesn't make it true. I would strongly encourage all of you, because of this thing called confirmation bias that we all have, go away, please check your facts, do your own research and think for yourself, and make sure that you're satisfied that what you're seeing here today actually is true. Because just because I'm standing here doesn't mean that it's the gospel and that you must go away and do this thing. Please do your own research by all means. And I would like to make sure that I don't upset the earned value management believers in this room, because there's some of you out there, and you can't tell them just by looking at them, but you're out there, I know it. It's fundamentally sound, I know that. I would be silly to stand here and say otherwise. When it's used appropriately, and when you do it like you mean it, and when you actually apply it diligently in a robust kind of fashion, it's good, it does work, but it does not suit every single circumstance. There is no such thing as one size fits all. I'm quite happy to be proven otherwise. My experience has been that there are times when it's just next to useless and we need to find a different way of achieving a similar outcome. So, project control systems. All of you will look at that and go, yeah, people, process and tools, we know all about that. And in the work that we do, it's basically all around cost and schedule and risk. Those are the basic kind of tools that we need to pick up. There's plenty of providers out here that are more than happy to let you know that their tool's the best tool and you must buy their one, but they can't all be right at the same time. Someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. So, risk, schedule and cost, we have tools that we all purchase to support those transactions within our project control systems. And in terms of the process, well, most of us will be working to an Australian standard, 4817.2019 for the EVM standard. And for the defence contractors in the room, you'll have an EVM supplement that goes hand in hand with that. And we also have people. But when we talk about people, it's not so much the people themselves, it's the behaviour of the people, which is the things that we need to manage. And one of the fundamental principles of critical chain as a method is that it's designed to counteract some of the negative behaviours that you might see in the work that we do. So, first we need to agree that this is true, that the behaviour that we see is a function of the person and the environment that they are in. And for the formula people in the room, there's even one of those that goes along with it. I don't know who you are, you're getting excited when you see a good formula, I know. Behaviour is a function of the person and the environment that they're in. But we're talking about project control systems here and the people that work within those systems. So we're going to modify it just a little bit. And I'll just tick forwards and backwards so you can see some of the words change right there. The output of the system will be a function of the system itself and the environment that it is in. And to understand those outputs of that system, the first thing that we're going to do, because we can, is measure it. And when we go about measuring something, it's because we want to understand this. We want to know what is changing, why is it changing, how do we deal with that change? And then we'll go one step further. Maybe there's several changes, but the whole point of a system like this is that change is then supposed to move around in a circle and induce the system to have some kind of difference so that the change is then counteracted. That's how this system of project control is supposed to operate. And we do that with the performance index. And in particular, because this is an industry that loves acronyms, we're too lazy to say schedule performance index or cost performance index, so we just use SPI and CPI. It's just easier. I think as Australians, the most efficient way to do something can also be the laziest way to do it. I just heard someone mention just now, as a group of people, we're too lazy even to say MCG, we'll just say the G. Because that's 60% quicker, I suppose, I don't know. Anyway, SPI and CPI, that's what they are designed to do. They are designed to be a measure that induces a system to make a change. But let's talk about the circumstances. The circumstances that Lead and Fighter was working in, and for anyone that doesn't know, Lead and Fighter last night got an award for innovation in the field of project controls, and it's based upon some of the work that we've done and we're seeing here today. So, the environment that we're operating in is basically a live environment, aircraft maintenance on a minutely, 15-minutely, 30 minutes, hourly kind of basis, spread over maybe a couple of weeks or maybe several months. And it is an operational kind of environment. It's completely live, and the output that we need from that has got to be all but real time. Now, how do you have earned value management and have a real-time live output with a historical performance index and get any kind of meaningful decision making out of that? If anyone can show me otherwise, I'm all ears and open to listening to that kind of stuff. But I've yet to see those two things operate in the same place effectively. So, if you've done your earned value reliably, responsibly and diligently, and I mean that, you don't just have a go and go, no, look, it was too hard and we'll walk away. Do your best and see if it is fit for purpose, and if it's not, maybe you can try earn schedule. Anybody heard of earn schedule in the room or had a go at that? There's a few hands there. Okay, that's good. Well, what if you've done all those and you are still reliably failing to deliver? Because it's entirely possible you give it your best and it's just not working for you. So there must be some other kind of constraint within the system that you're trying to operate, and it looks a little bit like this. If your constraint is, if you are absolutely failing to deliver, but you still have most of the inputs that you need within your system, and if you either aren't maximising your bottleneck resource, or you don't even know what your bottleneck resource is, there's a pretty reasonable chance that the constraint is going to be how you are going about managing your actual projects. It's the behaviour of people at that point. So this methodology comes from a fellow named Eli Goldratt, who wrote a book called The Goal. Has anybody in the room? Another show of hands, please. I'm trying to wake you up after having consumed too much free food. Well, they call it free, but it's prepaid in your ticket, of course, isn't it? Perception of free is an interesting thing. So a few people have read The Goal. Anybody used that in anger upon any of their projects and been able to wisely use it? We have one here, 1, 2. We have 2 out of 80. That's not too bad. That's an improvement. Oh, and a half-hearted from here. Oh, that's for 3 of you. Okay, that's not fair. So the follow-on from The Goal, the book, which I would strongly encourage you all to read, and if anybody really wants it, I'll do a quick question at the end, and whoever gets it right is going to get a free copy of that, courtesy of me, and you'll also get a copy of Critical Chain as well. And that's the second book that helps to explain, if we just go back a couple of slides, it helps you with how you manage the work. How do you respond in an appropriate way, and how do you counteract some of the negative behaviours that we see? So, me being me, I put on my Edward de Bono black hat and went round the Googleverse and went, this can't be right. If this is such a great methodology and it's so sound and reliable and robust, why isn't everybody doing this? In BAE Australia alone, we have over 220 projects and no one was doing critical chain. If you go around BAE Global, we have into the many, many, many thousands of projects, and I couldn't find one single business unit or project anywhere in that massive conglomerate operating this as a methodology. So if it's so good, why isn't everybody doing this? And I found a gentleman named Philip Maurice, who works out of France, and he has got the definitive list of businesses that have implemented critical chain as a methodology right across the globe. Now, I know you can't read that. You'll have access to the full slide pack afterwards. I just really wanted to point out the sheer numbers of global businesses and the types and some of their names that have been using this to improve their performance. So I can read, let's see what we've got here. The ones I highlighted in yellow, that's Airbus. Now, I have an aerospace bias, so I've basically gone through and highlighted all the aerospace ones. We have Airbus, we have some Army fleet support out of the United States. You'll see the third and fourth line down there contains BAE. That's our implementation up at Williamtown where the jet base is. You'll see Boeing on there, you'll see Boeing Space and Defence, you'll see Boeing again with their T-45 and Boeing yet again in another different business unit. You'll see CAE of the USA. You will see Albert. Are there any Albert employees in the room today? I've seen a few of them around, but I don't see any of them right now. The French Air Force have used this to improve some of the work that they do. Israeli aircraft industries, Lockheed Martin. Any Lockheed Martin employees here right now? No? Okay. Lufthansa, Pratt & Whitney, Raytheon, the list of defence contractors here goes on and on and on. But in particular, you'll see Thales, and then you'll see 4 from the US Air Force, and then you come over the page here, and I gave up highlighting the individual ones and just did the whole lot, because it's all US Air Force business units who use this as a methodology to help them reliably deliver on time and help counteract some of the negative behaviours that may surface when trying to manage projects. So the reality for most of us, I think, is going to be that we have this kind of current reality that looks a little bit like that. And if the writing's a little bit small, I do apologise. You never quite know what size screen you're actually going to get with these kinds of things. It's not uncommon to overrun schedule or budget, and it's not uncommon to have to deal with scope compromises. And you can see the rest of the list there. But wouldn't it be a nice world if our future reality looked a little bit like that, where maybe we didn't have to have all those problems all the time? And the lead and fighter experience certainly has been that our maintenance performance was fairly unreliable, and we went through using critical chain project management to improve how we manage that work, and we went from being about 40% on time as a rule to well and truly over 100%, to the point where our customer did at one point say, thanks, we actually don't want any more jets, we have enough now. You can slow down, please. And that's a nice place to be in. And then over the last 4 years, we have come up to a figure on average of around about 85 to 90% on time, reliable delivery through deep maintenance. And that's a pretty good number. That would equally rival any civilian maintenance organisation that deals with that kind of work as well. So how does it work, and what's the point, and why am I even talking about any of this? Let's start here. There is this thing that we do called work, and there is this other thing that we do called waste. We don't necessarily like to have to waste time, but we certainly spend a lot of time doing it. And, you know, just in simple terms, you and I know that there are jobs that we submit into the systems that we work within, and you and I know it might be a 30-minute job and that it's going to take a month, because that's just the way the system works. And we do these things to ourselves for reasons beyond me, but we can do better than this. So, waste. What actually is that waste, by the way? I mean, a simple run of thoughts from me is it's going to be things like that. That work stops because we're waiting for something. And you can see the list there. Has anybody got any other good ideas of what we might be stopping our work for? Or is that list good enough? I think it probably covers most things. Waiting for resources. The one that kills me is waiting for decisions. I mean, I'd rather someone just made a decision and just moved on rather than waiting for things to happen. And batching, I think, is going to be the death of all of us. When someone says, no, I can't do your job now because it's more effective for me to wait 4 weeks to do the same job, which would otherwise take 30 minutes. These are the things that we end up waiting for. There's work and there is waste. And we'll call that queue and wait. That's pretty much what happens. We're waiting for resources, and the great thing about waiting is that you can always blame somebody else, because it's not my fault. I'm waiting for someone to give me the resource to get my next bit of work done, so I'm off the hook and I'm responsibly done what I'm supposed to do, which is to now queue and wait. So what happens, the behaviour that we're trying to correct is that there is this dedicated task time that we know that really is how long the work should take if we didn't have to deal with all this waiting for things to occur. And then what happens over time is the official task time actually starts to include that waste. That's the actual estimate. Over time will just become that, and that's a fact. And I see people nodding and smiling, and I would agree that it's right to smile if it wasn't so serious, quite frankly. It's a real problem for all of us, not just for the industry that I work within, but I think all industries will face this. So that becomes the official task time. And then the concept of a dedicated task time is just completely lost on us. It's just gone at that point. But then, because we can measure something, we go ahead and we do. And the moment you measure something, if you think about the behaviour of the system, the moment you start to measure it, it will change the behaviour. So if I know that you're going to measure me by whether or not, I'll go back, I meet my task times, am I going to give you the dedicated task time, or am I going to give you the official task time of how long I think it's probably going to take, because I have to queue and wait for everything else going on within the system? There is no doubt, if you're going to measure me, I'm going to give you the biggest, fattest number that you could possibly think of. And there's also a behaviour that does surface that says, doesn't matter what number you put out there, someone's taking 10% off it anyway, so you deliberately overinflate, and we can end up going in a bit of a circle at that point. Now, but why do we do this? And this is one of the behaviours. I've written the word safety there. And what I mean was not safety in the traditional sense of cutting your fingers and things. I mean in personal safety, by the fact that you are going to measure me. I want to be a responsible and reliable and responsible employee, and I want to meet my task times that when I give you an estimate. So if you ask me to give you an estimate, I'm definitely including the safety in that thing. There's no doubt about that. But this becomes a bit of a circular kind of problem. So if we just tick over here a little bit, we would normally go through a 50%, 90% probability kind of process. Under critical chain, you ignore the top part pretty much and you come down to the bottom part and you think about the work that is to be done and you think about the safety that is embedded in that task, and we try to remove that safety. And the standard issue language you might see is what we have is this best case, most likely, worst case kind of scenario. What we would really like to do is try and skew it to the left a little bit. You see where the most likely line is now. The most likely is just the work being done. The most likely is not to include, if I go back one, the safety. That cannot be there because if it's not visible, it will get wasted. And then you reach the end of your week, your month, your project, whatever, and everybody wants to know, where did all the time go? Well, it just got wasted with queuing and wait and overinflated safety and estimates. So if we can try to get to a state that looks like that, where the most likely is the work and the safety deliberately gets removed from the estimates. And that's a challenge. It's one of the problems of this kind of implementation is people struggle to accept that that's okay and that you're allowed to do that. So then you come to build yourself with a schedule, and this is just simple kinds of pictures. We don't have a lot of time today to go into too greater detail, so we will just try and touch on the basics of it. But I'm just saying this to remind you, strongly encourage, if you're interested, please do go and do your research for yourself. And then someone today is also getting a book as well. So the critical path schedule would normally look like that. There's some work and there's some safety embedded in there, but it's the second line. Note that's an as soon as possible schedule. In a critical chain world, you simply just put some aggressive but achievable estimates in there and then switch it over to look like that, where there are no gaps in that thing. And you should be starting your work as late as possible, because the downside of forcing people to start as soon as possible is they have a tendency to start things that they can't finish for the sake of visual progress. And then the constraint, the waste that is actually causing them not to be able to achieve that task is one of those reasons why a package can start work and sit on 95% complete for months on end. They're simple kinds of things, but we do these to ourselves. So the safety, we must remove from the individual estimates deliberately and intentionally, like you mean it. Remove it. But it doesn't mean the safety is not needed. It means it's not needed for individual protection. The safety is there and it is needed, but it has to be for global protection of your schedule. But if you can't see it and make it visible, how can you possibly manage it? How can you understand it? How can you even, at the end of your debrief for the week, the month, or the project, understand where that time went if you had no method of even making it visible and understanding why that time just disappeared? So the safety must be there for all, not for individuals. And that can be a challenge as well. But it's one of the things that you have to overcome if you really want to get some reliable results using this methodology. Now, there are some other behaviours. Has anyone heard of student syndrome? I imagine we've all displayed this reliably and responsibly at some point in our life. There's no doubt about that, that because we know that there is safety in this time, that we definitely aren't going to start it as soon as we should. But then the problem then becomes, maybe this is the one time when you actually did need that safety time, you start too late, and next thing you know, everybody's late. We do these things to ourselves over and over and over. So this is one of the reasons why we have to remove the safety from the estimate and put it at the back, to encourage that sense of urgency, to keep people moving along, to keep them reliably doing the work that they're supposed to do without wasting that time. Because time is valuable. Time is valuable and we can't afford to waste it. There is another behaviour we need to correct, and that is called gold plating. And that is where if you give someone a certain length of time to do a particular task, they will probably take that long. It's just a normal kind of behaviour. Why would you report an early finish? Because the next time you get allocated a task, you're probably not going to get that same length of time. One of those behaviours is gold plating. It's the difference between how early you might be able to finish if you just went, yeah, look, I'm done, and I hand over my work, and when the actual deadline date is. Now, I don't do software development, but someone did say to me that this is common in a software development kind of program, that because they have got a lot of time, then they're probably going to take it. And if I think about it, whenever someone comes and says to me, how long is something going to take, I'm quite happy to ask, well, how long would you like it to take? because I can definitely make it take that long. If you want it to take 2 months or 3 or 4 months, I can really stretch that out that far. That's no problem. So gold plating is one of these behaviours. So we have to remove the safety from the estimates to help reduce the potential for that behaviour to surface. And that actually is called Parkinson's law. That's a well-known thing that is documented and scattered right through critical chain management material. Another one, we could call that sandbagging, and that is the difference between the actual time and estimated time because of this thing called safety. We know that things aren't going to go right. We know that there's going to be reasons why we need that safety time, and so we include it in there. But if the actual routinely comes in less than the estimated, and that gets repeated once or 2 or 3 times. I mean, we're trend analysis kind of people. That's what we do. That says, well, if that's the trend, guess what? Now that's the new estimated time, whether you like it or not. And these are some of the reasons why people waste time. The safety just gets consumed and it disappears. And it's systemic, and this method tries to counteract some of those behaviours because that's what you end up with, a new estimated time. And if you're being measured by whether you're meeting the work or the work plus safety time, then you're probably going to find ways around that. So to go through an implementation of these, to correct these kinds of behaviours, there's a whole series of books and websites and paraphernalia that you can get. These are just the 4 that we used. I call these ones the blue, the purple, the yellow, and the big one. The big one on the end is about 1,200 pages of academic goodness. For some people in the room, that's super exciting. For me, that's just a paperweight. I did open it once, and that was enough for me. I got to the first paragraph, and it says, we could basically describe all of theory of constraints with one word: focus. And I went, good, I'm done. I don't need to read the rest of those 1,200 pages. But some of you will want to read that, and I would strongly encourage the academic theoretical people in the room. You'll quite enjoy that, although you may be quite strange, but that's okay. Now, the blue one, the goal, and then Critical Chain is a good read. They're both written as a novel, because as people, we do learn by storytelling. That's how we learn. It's why we like to sit around fires and talk about stuff like that. And sit around the pub and talk about how great we were once 20 years ago. That's how we learn. And they are written as a novel specifically for that reason. The yellow one is the implementation handbook. Now, we didn't find that until 1.5 years after we started. That probably would have been useful on day one, but in reflection, maybe we wouldn't have been able to absorb some of the lessons quite so deeply, I think, if you just had all this information kind of handed to you. Again, well worthwhile, and you will get access to the slide packs if you want to get the names of any of those texts. You certainly will be able to. So, what do you do and where do you start? Well, I went to BAE Global and said, how do I do this? And no one knew at all, as there is no evidence whatsoever. So you just get started. And it goes simply like this. And I say simply, not necessarily as simple as this, but you take my point. The first step really is around taking away safety from people. And that can be a hard thing to do. So you have to use the right language and understand the behaviours that we're trying to counteract. You're creating an aggressive but achievable schedule. You're taking away the safety. Then you need to think about resource contention. Now, it's common in critical path to use a time-limited kind of model where the resource is allowed to go above the line, and then we just, excuse me, I'll take a step back, or I won't do that again. I'll call that evolution. Don't hit the microphone. All right. The critical path model would quite happily accept that you can blow your resource profile and just allow the float to wander backwards and forwards and just absorb that workload. And this kind of model, if you're doing that, you are deliberately ignoring the bottlenecks within your system. They're real, they're finite. There's no such thing as an infinite pool of people, and there is no such thing as an infinite system. They don't exist. It's finite, and just accept it for what it is. It's reality. So call it that and model that. Deal with the resource contention up front, and then you're less likely to have waste due to resources later on. Then you put the safety back. You put it back, you give it back to people. The safety is there, the project does need it. Things are going to go wrong. Things are not within our control that we can't even see now, so we have to put it back into the model. And then theoretically, you just go to execution reliably on time every time. That's what the sales pitch will tell you, and it's not quite as easy as that. Our experience was that we had a few small projects that were challenging, but we got through, and by the time we were done, as I said before, we were reliably and responsibly delivering on time to our customer, and it's a really good outcome. So there are some other challenges to face through though, Because we have changed how we're doing what we're doing, there are some new rules that we have to apply, because all methods have got some kind of rule sets that say, no, you have to do this and then this and then this. And the first one is the pipeline, and that really deals with the resource contention. The pipeline is only so big. You can't fit any more into it at that point. The Melbourne Freeway is a great example of that. When that pipeline is full, you can't put any more work into that system. It will break. So one of the smartest devices I think I've seen for automatic pipeline management is actually that pulsing traffic system that says, no, there's too much work in the system. The pipeline is blocked up. We're going to slow down the additional work coming into the system to allow everybody to get through. It's a really smart device. And pipelining in critical chain basically achieves exactly the same thing. It's to force you to acknowledge pipelines are finite. And then we deal with the buffering, and then the buffer management process is where the really interesting part kicks in. So buffer management looks a little bit like this. The schedule is on the left-hand side. The safety time is then split into three pieces on the end, a third, and a third. They're just arbitrary numbers. They're close enough and they're easy to work out. And the 50% figure that you'll see there, that suggests that once you have got yourself an aggressive but achievable schedule, you are going to, and you can be comfortable that you have scrubbed every last bit of safety out of that system of work, then you put 50% back on top of that for use. And what that means, if you have a 6-month schedule, you are going to have a 3-month buffer on the back end of it. And that can seem excessive for some people, but our experience has been that those numbers are about right. You don't have to put too much hard science into it. That works. And all of the implementations that you saw in the earlier on, they use the same kind of model. Get an aggressive but achievable schedule and give back 50% of the safety. Now, they're colour-coded for a reason, green, amber and reds, but they actually come with some behavioural words, because some of the behaviours we need to counteract are the management behaviours, because they can be equally detrimental. The first buffer window looks at watch, and that is a word directed squarely at management. Your role here is just to watch. Don't interfere. Don't make poor decisions that are going to interfere with the flow of work at this point. Just watch the system and just monitor it. See that everything is going okay, and don't interfere. Don't tamper with it. It's going okay. Now, the plan section, this is where we're starting to consume the buffer at a rate where we're probably going to run out of it before our due date if we keep doing what we're doing. And so that is where the word plan is directed squarely at management. You better have a plan for if this thing gets any worse. An act means exactly what it means. And they are verbs, if you note. They are doing words. They're not just a thing. They're not just a report. That is a verb directed at management. So act. As a manager, your role, once the buffer has gone into the red, is to take some super aggressive action to restore this thing back to the green as quickly as you can. Here's a sample of what a time-phased schedule might look like. So those little grey dots that you see on there, we'll just call them weekly reports, and we'll pretend that that's a 16-week schedule. And you can see in week 1, which is somewhere down around about there, that we're still on the green. Maybe we're just touching on orange just a little bit, but that's okay. We move into week 2, week 3, it actually starts to look a bit healthier. Our buffer is now well and truly into the green. And in a production meeting, if you've got a project that looks like that, where it's well and truly into the green, you almost don't even need to talk about it. You're better off allocating your time by starting with those ones that are in act and plan, because if it's in the green, it's fine. You're going to meet your due date and it will be all right. Now, as time goes by, you'll see that those little grey dots, which are weekly reports, start to climb up into the red. And that means we're consuming the buffer. On the left-hand side is the buffer penetration. On the bottom side is the length of the critical chain that you've completed. And you can see the buffer is starting to be consumed at a rate far greater than the amount of time that we have left and available to us. So that's where we need to take some super aggressive action. And if you look at that, you can see something's happened over the next few weeks. We've got ourselves back into the green. And on 100% of critical chain complete, week 16, we're just sitting on the green and orange. And that's a good outcome. That's a happy project. It does raise the question of when is it okay to use 100% of the buffer? And I would say, well, on the very last day of the project, if you've used all of it, okay, that's what it's there for, as long as you can responsibly account for why it was used. The post-project feedback process that says, why was that time wasted? Why was it consumed? Why was the safety needed? Those are the things we need to address as well. So there are some challenges. The very first challenge that you must overcome, you will see written there, managerial commitment to the rules. They have to follow the rules just like everybody else. It is not fair to place new rules upon a system and not partake in those rules yourself. So you must get the highest level of buy-in to your model, or there's going to be a get out of jail free that says, no, the rules don't apply to me. So you must have that commitment. The second challenge is around taking this wonderful theory and actually putting it into practice. How do you actually do that? And you can do it yourself. You can get books, you can hire a consultant, you can just buy the software and have a go. Like, there's any number of ways that you can do it. Our model was to do some of it ourselves, but also to hire a consultant. And eventually we decided to purchase some software as well. Though I'll make it very, very clear, the method has got nothing to do with software. Software helps make it sustainable, but you can do it without software. For the first 3 months, we actually put all of our schedules on a wall and got a piece of brown string. And the brown string was equal to time now. And every day, we just moved the piece of brown string. And just to prove that the method works and it's got nothing to do with software. But we did buy some in the end. And then that creates the kind of sustainment of the model as well. So there are a few other things. I'm not going to just touch on these briefly. There's some circular problems that kind of surface where if you break the rules, you're going to start to see some negative impacts. So if you ignore the rules of pipelining, you are going to get high work in process. Because you've done that, you're going to get your buffers consumed at a rate that is not acceptable. And then you're going to end up with long cycle times. And because you've got long cycle times, you're going around in another circle that says, well, now we can't even honour the pipeline because we've already got too much work on our plate. So you break the rules at your peril. You follow the rules and you will deliver on time. And you may even get yourself into a position, if you're really, really quite bad at this, where you cannot reduce your work in process because you've allowed it to get so far out of control. So that is the importance. There's very, very simple rules, but you must follow them. And then you also end up with too many conflicts, which means priorities everywhere and things get out of control. And then eventually you may get into a state where someone starts saying, oh, look, shorter cycle times, it was just never going to happen anyway. It's not possible, it's not achievable. And that's not true. We just broke the rules and didn't follow the work that we were supposed to be doing. So, to mechanise the change, because there's no point having a change unless you're going to make it a sustainable one, there are a few things you need to follow. You better put a new policy in place that says the pipeline is finite and you must honour that. Every once in a while, you should be making sure that you actually are following the policy, because that's important. Why would you bother making one if you're never going to follow it, nor check that you are following it? You need to have some kind of alert that lets you know when the pipeline is full, in much the same way that the Melbourne Freeway has a little automated measure that says, there's too much work in here. Here's a flag, turn on the traffic signals. You must always schedule using buffer-based priorities. And by that I mean, that one right there. You should be using that to set your priorities. Whichever one is in the red today, that is the one that is getting the most attention. Don't bother even talking about what's in the green because it's fine. And then compliance, tasks not following priorities. There will be times when it's okay to work out of sequence for different reasons, but that should not be your rule of thumb. Your rule of thumb should always be use the buffer-based priority. That is the way to reliably deliver these projects on time. But the other thing is we are a business and we have to be mindful of cost. Critical chain, to some degree, does ignore the concept of cost being hand in hand with this, but I think that's actually a somewhat juvenile kind of model, and we do need to be mindful of that and aware of it, because if you look at that chart right there, when on that chart would it be okay to spend overtime as a recovery kind of task? If you look somewhere around about the middle of that, where it's in the red and the orange, that'd be the sensible, responsible time to spend cash trying to recover a project. But there may be times when requests come in for overtimes and things for an aircraft or a project, but is actually still in the green or in the orange. And why would you even bother approving something like that? You're just throwing away money for a project which is doing just fine. So the challenge is, well, then how do you keep track of your costs as well as your schedule? Because that's the right thing to do. And this method, to some degree, takes the mindset that if you protect schedule, you will probably contain the cost. In simple terms. And I go, well, yeah, okay, but I still want to be able to make a sensible cost-based decision at the right time. And so we need to be very, very mindful that there's two sides of this. There's an early warning, a daily early warning, which is how we choose to operate. It depends on your schedules. You might have a a schedule which runs for 1 day if it's a mining shutdown, or it might be 8 months. But we've been running with a daily update, and it's focused squarely and deliberately on tomorrow, because that's the part that you can control. And the percent complete side of it lives in earned value world, and that's yesterday, and that's where we understand the spending. And you have to be able to put the two together, because I think you can't ignore your percent complete and what you've spent to get where you are, but you also can't ignore the future either and just somehow use a mathematical formula to say, well, that's what happened yesterday, therefore that's what's going to happen tomorrow, because the two aren't necessarily connected like that. So the model that we use looks a little bit like that. We continue to track our SBI and CPI within our production workbooks, so that we do have an understanding of the cost against a particular project, but we also use the buffer index goodness of critical chain project management to help set the priorities and to help protect the due dates in the future. So our version is actually a hybrid, and I think that's the best way to do it. But that's perfectly normal for methodologies to evolve like that. There's a piece over here which is good, there's a piece over here which is good. Somewhere along the way they combine and you get a better product. So I happen to think that that's a much, much better model, and the evidence that we have of a couple of years worth of reliable delivery out of maintenance suggests that actually works really quite well. So what you can also get from that, though, you can extrapolate a little decision-making matrix that says, well, what do I do? Because now I've got 3 metrics, not just 2. It's easy if schedule's good and cost is bad, well, okay, you know where you are. But what about the buffer side of it as well? So you probably can't read that, and that's okay. You'll get the copy of the slides accessible from the website after the expo, if not loaded in there already. There is a matrix that you can run through. What if my buffer index is really quite poor, but my cost is good and my SPI is good? It comes with working instructions just like that. So it's a really straightforward kind of thing, and quite easy to use. So I just want to quickly touch on software as well. There are many, many, many providers of critical chain project management software. We went through a pretty rigid cost-benefit analysis against quite a lot of them, and in the end we decided on one particular tool. And it works really quite well. It works much like an iPad. There happens to be a help manual, but I don't think we even opened it for the first 6 months of using the tool. It's just so easy to use. There are many different versions of them, and if you really try hard, you can do that in Microsoft Excel. My talent runs out when it comes to trying to make fever charts that are on diagonals with those kinds of things. So if there's any super skilled people in the room, maybe you don't need to go get some software. Maybe you can just buy your own. We decided it was the best way to make a sustainable kind of outcome. Yeah, like I said, there's lots of different providers there. Take your pick, but just want to remind you, it's got nothing to do with the software. It's the behaviour that we're trying to manage, and it's the model of a methodology that helps counteract those kinds of behaviours, but software will help make it a sustainable process. So just to remind you, those are the 2 books you really ought to read if you have any more interest in this, or just go on Googleverse and you will find 500 different PDFs. They all try to explain it, but really you just have to read them. It's not a huge investment, and I'll give away a copy of each of those shortly, which I've, in my defence, have left in Newcastle because I left there in a hurry on Sunday, completely jet lagged. So I will be I'll be mailing them to you, along with another little surprise bonus as well. So I just very, very briefly want to summarise. It really is as simple as this. That's the word out of the big book. I've saved you 1,200 pages worth of reading and $140 of your money. That big book will give you that word right there, focus. Critical chain will give you the word act. You put them together and you have focus and you have act, and that's all you really need to do with this methodology. It actually is that simple, although it doesn't seem like that. My experience has been this is what this method will give you. What to focus on and when you're supposed to act. Does that matter, you say? Well, what if we put that into a quadrant like a good analyst and said, what does it mean? Which one of those boxes would you rather be in? Having just got off a 24-hour flight, I think I'm in the bottom right. I'm quite comfortably there right about now, actually. But we do have, look, I'm joking, but we do have people in our projects that are very good at the whole don't focus thing, because it doesn't matter as long as I'm seen to be doing something. Because it's really important to be seen to be doing something. So no focus, but plenty of action. And there are going to be people who are very, very comfortable at focusing and telling you all the things that you're doing wrong, but where are they when the time comes for the hard work to be done to actually fix those problems? That's the focus and that's the don't act part. I would rather that we had a team, a project, a hangar, an entire business full of people, and being quite unselfish, an entire defence industry full of project management people who are all responsibly focusing on what is the right thing to resolve and acting when they are supposed to act as well. So those are the two primary behaviours that we'd like to see everybody showcasing at all times. So there you go, there's the books. Who wants to win a book or two? Somebody, a few eyebrows, a few smiles, a hand up. The first person to put the hand up was that gentleman right there, and based purely on that, I'm going to give you those two books. The most enthusiastic man put his hand up first, or the one that was least afraid, and what did he do? He focused and he acted. So clearly he's learned what he's supposed to do at this point. How are we going for time? What time am I supposed to finish, please? 1:55. We're slightly over. So that means we don't have any more time for questions, but you're welcome to contact me via LinkedIn or stalk me on any other social media platform of your choice, or you can come and find us down at the BA stall downstairs. No, on the same layer as what we are right now. Thank you for your time, sir. You need to come and see me and give me your details, and I'll get you some prizes. Thank you for your interest, and remember, focus and act, please, at all times. Thank you.